That's when the happiness that I was seeking all those years suddenly revealed itself. And I didn't need to get a boat or a plane or anything.
How can I help you? What would you like to talk about?
Everything that we do is because we want to make ourselves happy. And everything that we've done in the past has never achieved it, even though we believed it would. I retired when I was 39. I had the Bentleys, and I had my own plane. I used to fly to Monte Carlo in my own plane, and then I had a boat and done all that stuff. The people in Monaco, of course, very wealthy, but they don't go around with smiles on their faces all the time. They probably seem less happy than anybody else, really. Shifting and changing what is in the material world has no bearing on what's going on internally. It doesn't bring happiness at all. If I take the dog for a walk over the field, and the moment that I am getting that fact that there's nothing that's real, there's only everything is space appearing to be an object, but it's not actually a separate object. That's when the happiness that I was seeking all those years suddenly reveals itself. And I didn't need to get a boat or a plane or anything. I get into a state that I would be happy to be in for the rest of my life. I would never want to leave. Why do you leave it? Why don't you stay in it? What the hell is going on? How do you get on with it?
It sounds like you're definitely having, maybe what started as glimpses that are now kind of unfolding in a deeper and a longer fashion. So they're becoming more of a seeing, if you like, rather than a glimpse. Sounds like it's becoming a bit more established. I mean, what I found is that the mind and the body are very slow to catch up with what's actually going on. And for me, they resisted in quite a big way to what was known. Because what you've tried to describe there, and what we all try to describe, those of us that have seen and realized this, is indescribable, right? It's a knowing beyond mind. So the mind, by definition, cannot get it. It can't get it like physically hold it, but it can't get it as in understand it, because it's beyond mind. So for me, what happened was resistance. The mind would kick in again. This is not real. You're just making this up. You're losing it. You're pretending. You're having these little shifts, and you're like, oh yeah, it's. But like you said, why are you coming back? Like, you're not fully established. You're not awakened. This is all just rubbish. So this is what the mind does, because it doesn't know what else to do. It's got its modus operandi of like protecting this individual, thinking it's a separate self, and anything that jeopardizes that, it's like, whoa, well, no, like everything, it's fight or flight mode always, right? So the mind resisted, and that does continue for some time. I mean, it never, as you said right at the beginning, it never stops. That the mind will always pop up with its nonsense, frankly. The body also resisted. Maybe you've experienced this, maybe you haven't, maybe you've gone through it already, or maybe you just won't. But for me, there was like a knot in the stomach, like this existential kind of fist, like tight knot of not wanting to let go. Like this is scary now, because there is nothing, if I truly let go here, then what's going to happen to the me? So these two things over time, they occur less and less, and they just become less meaningful. You get to a point where you realize, as it sounds like you're close, if not there anyway, that it's just not personal. It's never been personal. But yeah, you may find, this kind of toing and froing, flip flopping from having it or being in it to then back in the world. But your knowing of it understands that that's not actually what's happening. That's the mind's interpretation. I got it. I've lost it. I'm in it. I'm out of it. But what you've seen and what you already know at a deeper level is that there's no difference between the two things. If you're, making a cup of tea, or you're walking in bliss in nature, feeling oneness, or you're, shouting at the TV at a football match, it's the same. It's this. You've not left reality or become unspiritual or departed from oneness. So what I would say, and what I tell other people, is to don't let the mind undermine what you truly know. You can't not be this.
Is the mind saying this? Is the mind not wanting to be exposed for what it is? Is the illusory self wanting to protect itself?
Yeah, the mind will, and you can get trapped in. I spent probably many months in that sort of cycle of thinking through it all, right? Because the mind's trying to process, it's trying to find its place in the true reality that is now known. And there is no place for it. It doesn't disappear, but it can't find a home because it isn't, it's an aspect of oneness and all that there is, but it doesn't have a sort of a residence. It can't fit into, because mind is based purely on separation and the idea of a separate self. So once that's been proven to be non-existent, the mind is just all over the place. Like it can't rest. So I was trapped for months in sort of thinking this through. The mind was trying to process it, obviously never being able to fully process it. And then, like you say there, you get into these cyclical thoughts. You end up thinking about thoughts. Is this thought, where did this thought come from? What does this thought mean? Does thinking this mean either that I'm in this or that I'm out? And again, it's the mind is just like, oh, this is awesome. The mind is just like, got him, got it back. But simultaneously, there's nothing wrong with that, because that too is part of it, So it's just something that you ride out. I mean, it will change. It sounds like at the moment it kind of comes in waves. So, the waves to begin with are pretty dramatic, peaks and troughs, and also frequent. Changing rapidly. Like sometimes, like, oh yeah, this is amazing bliss. It feels final. When you have that realization, you're like, oh, this is it now. So much time I spent waiting. Now I get it. And then an hour later, you're like, oh, you're in not depression, but you're like, oh no, I was totally kidding myself, and I'm just back to square one. So you have these real peaks, highs, and lows. Over time, the peaks and troughs become less pronounced, and they occur less frequently. But the mind doesn't ever stop. You just pay less attention to it,
right,
over time. And it's kind of treading that fine line, because it's that balancing act of doing nothing but not actively doing nothing.
Yeah. People are looking for, well, what's the point of life? Well, there isn't a point to life. So what are we doing it for? I don't know. So when you've seen that, what do you do?
you can get trapped in that void of sort of partial realization where you kind of you've become nothing, right? So I mean, obviously you've not actually become anything, you've not changed, but your realization has seen that the self is kind of non-existent. But what goes hand in hand with that is that you are simultaneously everything, like everything is you. Now, obviously, if everything is you, then, you know, harming yourself or ending yourself makes no sense, because you can't end what you are, because everything is what you are. So it just doesn't, and obviously it also pretty much eradicates all of suffering in one fell swoop, because you're not trying, you don't need anything, you don't want everything, you don't lack anything, because you are everything. So like, what, you know, literally there is no problem. But what can happen is if there is still that sort of residue of separate self, and there's not a sort of full realization that there is only oneness, then the dissolution of that separate self, or partial dissolution of it, is obviously terrifying. Or the realization that, well, I'm not doing this, there's no point to this. But unless it's followed by that realization that is also that everything is what you are, then yeah, it can obviously lead to, you know, various issues. You know, and people do struggle with that. And I went through that as well for several months, not knowing, not having a purpose. Like I literally couldn't operate at a human level in the world for months on end. I would just sit. I just had no idea what I was supposed to do. I didn't want to do anything. I wasn't drawn to anything. But it wasn't a blissful state at all. It was quite the opposite. Because there was still a sense of a me. It's like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
I don't have motivation. What is my place in the world? So there was still, even though I'd sensed that there was, you know, that this thing here wasn't quite real, there was still that remnant connected. So I'd sort of partially seen through the illusion, but not fully to alleviate the suffering. So it was this limbo state. But eventually, as I said, with the waves up and down, it just establishes itself. And from that point on, it's just whatever, you know, I refer to it as like the whack-a-mole thing, you know, just whatever pops up just gets whacked. If nothing pops up, nothing gets whacked. If they all pop, you know, it's, you know, during that time, I would really struggle just to get out of bed. You know, I had no reason. There was no impetus. This felt like no drive. Now, it's not like, oh, I've got this thing to do. I just want to get out of bed. I'm driving for this goal. I want to achieve. It's literally just, there is an inflation, you know, like those, I talk about these guys outside the garage forecourt that inflate, you know, the characters that, it's just like that. It motivates itself to do what it needs to do at any given time, which can include the apparent doing of nothing, just sitting or whatever, but can also include, you know, working in business or, you know, tending to kids or whatever. But there's no sense that it's me that's doing it. Yeah, it's a strange thing.
You say there's no sense of you doing it. Is that permanent now? That sense that it's just happening, but there isn't a person doing it, or does it flicker?
No, it doesn't flicker. I mean, the mind never stops. And, we'll continue to tell its stories, but it's, to begin with, when you kind of see these things or experience these things, it's literally like that. So it's like something that you see. So it becomes like a memory. Oh, I saw that. Or you experience it. Oh, I experienced that. I felt it. But when that happens enough, sometimes it only takes once. It depends on the person, so-called person. But after a number of times, it's just, it's not anything that has to be thought about or remembered or considered. It's just always there.
Yeah.
It's just, but it doesn't, I think this is something that people get caught up in, that they think that, life, inverted commas, will be perfect. They walk around on clouds and, be in ecstatic bliss the whole time. It doesn't give you a pass on any of that. The human aspect still goes through all of its stuff, but it makes no difference what that stuff is. It doesn't change it doesn't change what's known. It doesn't affect, the light of awareness can shine on anything and can be any color at all. But it's always just the light. It is not affected by any of that. But yeah, for me, what I found is I say with the peaks and troughs, the experiential nature of it, that kind of rush or that adrenaline or that bliss or fast heart rate or whatever, just fades over time, and you're just left with it's just a calm, loving peace. It's the kind of, it's not the definition of happiness that most people think, I'm happy, I won the lottery, or, I don't know, my team won or whatever. And they feel that they think that that's what happiness is. But, a definition of happiness is just no suffering, no problem, just no problems. And that doesn't mean that you're on cloud nine the whole time. It just means everything's fine, So it becomes quite a normal thing. Just feels, it's like starts by being in the background, but it permeates so that it's not something that occurs or doesn't occur. Not something you have to remember. It's not something that's internal either. It's just, it starts back here, been a background kind of memory of an experience of something that you felt or saw. And over time, it just permeates everything. It's the only way that I can describe it.
It's often a word that people use all the time is awareness, that everything is awareness or everything is consciousness or what have you. I've always had a bit of a problem with the word awareness, because if I walk along a path in the countryside and I pass a boulder, I can be aware of the boulder, but the boulder isn't aware of me. My dog there, he's aware. He knows when his dinner's coming. What have you? He's aware of things. The dinner isn't aware that the dog's coming, but he's aware when his dinner's coming. What the hell is that? What the hell is that?
I mean, the use of the word awareness, people struggle when they've seen to try and describe something that's indescribable, right? So they use the word spirit or God or consciousness or awareness. I try and simplify it sometimes, just say it's all that there is, because everybody knows what that is. But ultimately, the only thing the only certainty that you have is being aware of a thing. So that rock that, let's say you look up at the moon, you say, well, the moon's not aware. It doesn't know that I'm looking at it, right? But the only reality of the moon is your awareness of it. So it is literally made of awareness.
Right.
It's not aware in the sense of conscious and how the human mind has laid down this definition of what it means to be little a aware. But everything in that sense is awareness. That, as Rupert Spira says, that the only thing you know about anything is the knowing of it. Like, so when you see that printer, somebody might say, oh, it's made of matter, it's made of atoms. But when you touch that printer, it's only your awareness of it that is known. You cannot know the physical. You cannot know the existence of an atom. You can only know the awareness or the knowing of that thing. So that's what they mean when they say, the whole universe is made of awareness, or consciousness, this infinite intelligence is what all this stuff is.
Yes. Yes.
And as a whole, obviously it is aware, because it is awareness. Awareness is aware of itself.
Yes. Right. So it's not really referring to using the word awareness as an energetic thing. It's the awareness. When people say everything is awareness, there's only consciousness or there's only awareness. Yeah, I can see that if the whole of the human race was wiped out and there was nothing that was a conscious, well, what would there be? There isn't any. That's it. There's nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. Without awareness, nothing exists, and therefore, awareness is everything. That's the point. I mean, without, because this goes into the scientific realm, and people say, oh yeah, but awareness and consciousness produced by the mind or the brain. But there's no scientific evidence for that. Scientists cannot produce one iota of evidence that that's the case. It could equally well be that the brain is merely a receptor and a receiver for consciousness. I mean, there's just as much evidence for that, i.e. zero. Like, they don't know.
Yeah.
But at the sort of the absolute level, all of this, everything, all that there is awareness. It's just one way of describing what it is, because it's only our awareness of it that brings it into existence. And even if the entire human race and all sentient beings on all planets were eradicated, there would still be all that there is, just minus some aspects of, it still is. And it's just, people choose to use that word awareness or consciousness to define that.
A thought popped up this morning. I'd be quite happy living in an ashram, sitting cross-legged, But then I thought, but that's changing the place and changing the environment again, thinking that you're happy by being in an ashram. And I'm kind of aware that, I tend to go out and look towards the sky and to get these feelings. But it's the same here, now, in the sky. There shouldn't be any difference. There isn't any difference. So,
Yeah, that's a very good point. I had similar feelings early on as well. With mine was going to, living in a wood cabin.
Right.
And it's sort of early sort of realization. Oh, I just need to go and moved to a wood cabin in the forest.
Mm.
But this is, you're already in the ashram. Like, it's what you said earlier on, that you cannot, there's no separation. There's not something moving in space. I used to kind of think of it as like a soup, like it's all just soup, but it's even denser than that. It's just like water, I guess.
Yeah.
You're just water in water.
Exactly that.
Why would you want to move to another part of the water? Like it's the same. When somebody's first going through an awakening and they start to struggle. So the tide, they kind of tied upside down by they're tied upside down. They're hanging with their head down towards the beach, if you like, and the tide's coming in. And that's how it can feel like you're out of control. This realization, this awakening is coming in, it's sweeping you up. And the water comes in and you're upside down, it comes up to your head and you're like, oh no, you're struggling. It feels different, right? This different world, this different sensations, a different reality. So you keep struggling, you think you're going to drown, and then it goes further and further until it immerses you completely and you actually realize you're a fish.
Right.
And you can breathe. And this was your natural environment all along. The struggle and the flapping around was all occurring before when you believed yourself to, when you were outside of this. Because that is the paradox that, people struggle and search and seek. They had it all along. You don't need to go anywhere or become anything.
Yeah.
And obviously that's challenging for people when they so desperately want it,
Yeah, it is quite extraordinary, isn't it? How our illusionary self takes ownership of things that it has no ownership of at all.
You relate to this as a business owner, a former business owner, that you feel like a master of your own destiny. So you selectively, not just entrepreneurs, but people in life generally, would look at you're constantly trying to shape outcomes, right? If I do this, I'll get this. That'll make me happy. If I do this, I'll do that, and it'll prevent this, and that'll make me happy. And you sort of have this selective memory of when it worked. Oh yeah, and I did that, and I did that, and it was amazing. What we tend to forget is all the times it didn't work. Like, yeah, maybe if I just do it differently. Like, we don't get the message. Like, you don't get the message that you're not actually in control of any of this. It's like the little kid in a passenger seat with a toy steering wheel, thinking that they're controlling the thing. And then eventually you kind of realize, you take your hands off, you're like, oh, it's still moving. Like, oh wow, that's weird.
Yeah. Or you could be the little kid with a plastic steering wheel doing this, but he's actually on a train. And when he lets go, the tracks just take you wherever he's going anyway.